Hello there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on the power of research in optimizing navigation on websites and apps. There are still people joining, so just while we wait for that, I just wanted to point out that we have a chat on the screen on the right-hand side where we would love you just to say hello and introduce yourselves, so it feels a bit less lonely, a bit less like we're speaking into the void here. Let us know you're there. One tab along on that chat is Q&A. So as we're going along, if you've got any questions that you want to ask, please drop them in that tab and we'll get to them at the end. Hi, Justin. There you go. Somebody's there. I knew that. Just to reassure you, if you know us as Bunnyfoot, this slide here doesn't look like the one you'll probably be expecting. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. You're not in the wrong webinar. You're in the right place, but we'll talk to that soon. Oh, lots of people now. Hello, hello, hello. Some logos here. We had over 350 people register from over 190 companies, so that's amazing. So nice to see some names we know and some new names as well. So you're all very welcome there. So shall we? Let's just launch in. So just a little bit about me. Hi, my name is Alison Rawlings. I was the MD of Bunnyfoot. I'm now Director of Insight and UX. I've been in UX for over 30 years now because I'm really old, but I've worked across both agencies and financial services, sort of moving between them. I've been 16 years at Bunnyfoot, now Gain. Now I'm primarily supporting clients on UX strategy projects, but happy to dip my toe into all sorts of things. And just hand over to Aimée and she'll tell you about herself there.
Hello, nice to see you all. My name's Aimée. I'm Head of Fieldwork and Insight at Gain, previously Bunnyfoot. I look after our fieldwork team, but I'm also very much hands-on in leading and delivering projects, right from sort of short tactical pieces of UX research through to much bigger strategic service design pieces as well. Originally started out in print design and gradually over the years I've moved into digital and UX and service design as well. But I think really for me, I've always been passionate about understanding people and understanding businesses and trying to make sure that I'm creating things that are meeting the needs of both businesses and their users in a sustainable way. I have had the privilege over the last decade or so at previously Bunnyfoot, now Gain, working with a number of different clients, all sorts of different clients, few more recent ones that I've got on the screen just here. I'm also involved in writing and teaching some of our courses. So the Fundamentals of Service Design is one, and I teach on a number of other training courses as well. So yeah, lovely to be here today and looking forward to getting into things in a moment. But for now, I'm just going to hand back to Ali.
Thank you. So just briefly, before we jump into the content of the webinar today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the changes that have been taking place at Bunnyfoot. I'll be really quick. I had one of my wisdom teeth out this morning, so I am not wanting to talk for long, and you'll all be very glad about that because you're here to listen to Aimée, not me. But I just wanted to just quickly, talk to you a little bit about the changes at Bunnyfoot. So if you know us, you'll recognize this slide. Bunnyfoot has been going for 25 years. A team of specialist consultants and practitioners. We've got offices in London and Sheffield, a wide range of UX services, including UX strategy and innovation, user research, usability testing, interaction design, UX. We also offer training courses, we do participant recruitment, and we hire out our own labs and build them for other people as well. So a full range of UX services. You might also have seen this slide. So for 6 years now, we've been part of the Sideshow Group, a group of these 10 agencies here, operating sort of together but side by side rather than as a single company. And over the last month or so, I think the biggest change, all of those agencies have joined together to form one company called Gain. Though that company is structured into 5 areas of expertise that you can see there on the right-hand side. So the services that were being delivered by each of the 10 agencies, often by more than one, are still being offered, but within a sort of clearer, unified structure now. So if we move on to the next slide, you can see a brief description of what each of those areas of expertise cover. Experience, cunningly highlighted in purple, is where Bunnyfoot, what was Bunnyfoot, now sits. So you can, not just Bunnyfoot, there's a number of agencies that have formed Gain Experience. We offer the full range of services that Bunnyfoot used to offer, but we've expanded that to include things like digital strategy, technology, and e-commerce. So we sit alongside those other areas of expertise, but work as one company, still offering exactly the same things that Bunnyfoot used to offer, but now in a much wider context within Experience and beyond Experience. We're offering that full range of digital services. So for those of you who know us and have enjoyed working with us before, you would be absolutely working in the same way with the same team of people. A slightly bigger team means that we can be more responsive to your needs. We can perhaps work a bit more quickly for you, and we can expand those services within Experience and then beyond that into the wider Gain team as well. There's a little bit here that describes what Gain Experience does, but you'll recognize it, I'm sure, if you're familiar with Bunnyfoot. So research and insight, fieldwork recruitment, UX training, usability and evaluation, experience design are all still there. Alongside that, digital strategy and e-commerce and technology are there as well. We'd really love to talk to you about all the changes that are happening. If you'd like to know more, please get in touch and we can arrange a call. So yeah, one company now, 650 people in the whole company. We have 9 offices, both in the UK and outside the UK. So we've got offices in North America and Europe and India and the Philippines. So we're really well placed for those of you that have worked internationally with us to continue doing that as well. So really exciting news for us. We'd really love to talk to you more about it, but you're here to listen to Aimée. So I shall hand you back. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So as Ali mentioned, it's lovely to see so many of you saying hello in the chat panel just on the right-hand side on the webinar platform today. As Ali said, we do also have that Q&A box. We'll make sure there's time at the end for some Q&A. So if you've got any questions, do feel free to drop them in there. Try and keep them in that Q&A box rather than the chat, just so we can keep track of them. And you can also upvote questions in there. So if somebody's pinched the one that you were going to ask, you can go ahead and upvote. Whenever we run these events, we always get questions about the recording. Just to let you know that Joe Hutton will be in touch after the session today with the recording, so you don't need to worry about that. And also, excitingly today, we have got the opportunity that I'm going to share a bit more about later on, where we've got a limited number of free follow-up consultations available about using research to optimize navigation and information architecture. So we can actually help to support you in applying what we're talking about today with some free consultancy sessions as well. So we'll share details about that at the end and how you can express your interest in those. But let's get into things. So I'd like you to imagine just for a moment that you are in a supermarket and you are trying to find something that is on your list. It's a very particular item and you're not really sure where to start with finding this thing. What might you do? What might help you? Well, you're probably going to start looking around and trying to see if there's something there that might direct you to where you need to go. So you're probably looking around maybe for sort of big department signs like this one on the left, or maybe it's sort of hung aisle signs. It could be even sort of shelf labels. Maybe, if you're lucky, there might be some floor graphics on the floor that might lead you to a certain section or a promotion or something. And so maybe you spot a sign and you kind of think, okay, maybe that's the general sort of area I should head in. And as you get closer, you start to look at the sort of the smaller labels and try and find what it is that you're looking for. But as you get closer, you realise the items that you're expecting to see are not there. And actually it's something different. And so you're even more confused about where you need to go than you were before. So you wander around a bit more, you try and look for some other signs. Maybe you bump into a member of staff in the shop and you ask them for help. But if after all that you've still had no joy, you might just have to give up. You might just leave your trolley empty and leave the store. Now think about that same scenario, but for a moment, just imagine that you're in a country where you don't speak the language, where all the signage is written in a language that you can't read, so you can't understand any of what it's saying. You're purely having to rely on pictures, really, to look at pictures of the products. You may be looking at the products themselves to try and locate where you are in the store, and then try and work out where it is that you need to go next to get to the thing that you're trying to find. What about if you're in the same scenario, but actually maybe you're partially sighted? So actually it's really difficult for you to see all of the different signage in the store, or perhaps you're on your phone and you've got your headphones in on a call, and so you can't hear the announcement in the store that says there's 5 minutes left until store closing time. So you don't know you need to hurry up your search. Or maybe, like I often am, you're with your young kids and you've got all the distractions of shopping with young children. So it makes it really hard for you to concentrate and to work out where it is that you've got to go. All those different scenarios would have quite an impact on your shopping experience and quite an impact on whether you're able to actually find what it is that you need. And it's exactly the same in the digital world, right? We've all been there where we've struggled to find something in a physical store, but equally, we've all been there when we've been struggling to find something on a website or an app, whether that is a very specific item that we're wanting to buy or a piece of information that we really need, and we just don't know where to go. So we might, again, look for things to help us. We might look for big signs, we might look for smaller labels. But if ultimately that website or app is not set up in a way that aligns with our mental model, it's going to be very difficult for us to find the thing that we need, because our idea of where that thing should be isn't met by the website or app. And of course, there can be all sorts of other factors that can influence our experience of navigating on a website or an app. It could be accessibility needs, it could be distractions, even our emotional state that day. If we're feeling particularly tired or excited or stressed, all of that will have an impact. And ultimately, the impact of poor navigation is that users get frustrated. We see increased bounce rates, we see lost sales, we see kind of increased calls to helplines, perhaps increased costs to service an individual sale because they're not able to self-service, they're needing to contact you in some other way. And depending on the type of organisation that you are, it could even lead to safety issues. There could be things like if a user's not been able to find the very vital health information that they need, or the very specific instructions of how to operate a particular thing, all of that could have a really negative impact and negative consequence. So this is why we're talking about this subject today. This is why it's so important that we think about these things when we're designing digital products and services. And today I want to talk you through 3 common navigation pitfalls to watch out for, 3 key navigation principles that you can implement, and 3 proven research methods to enable you to use evidence, importantly, to confidently make design decisions that will improve usability and flow across your websites and apps. So let's start off by looking at 3 common navigation pitfalls. The first one, badly implemented mega menus. It's probably something that we've all come across before. No, mega menus in themselves are not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, they can actually be really good. They can help with discoverability because they can display things that people maybe otherwise didn't know were there. They can also help users learn the taxonomy of a website. They can educate them on the content of the website. This is the John Lewis mega nav that shows on screen here. And you can see here they've got levels 1, 2, and 3 all displayed at the same time, and it really clearly lays those out. So you've got things like a category like Inspire Me on here, which on its own probably doesn't mean an awful lot, but within a mega nav, that clearly informs its users what that section contains. This little bit here, autumnal decor. Some users may not know what autumnal decor is. They may not have thought to look for that for themselves, but they've discovered it because it's laid out in that mega nav. So mega navs definitely can have their place. They can aid discoverability. However, word of caution, they do need to be implemented with care. And there's a few different things that we need to think about when we're implementing mega navs or mega menus. So they need to be implemented with care because they can get really cluttered. You know the scenario where everybody wants their thing displayed with equal prominence or more prominence than everybody else's thing in the menu. And so you can end up with a situation like this where you've just got so much going on that it's hard for a user to know where to start. It's hard for them to identify what's the first thing they should click on. It's hard for them to know what the layout of the site is and to understand the structure of it from this kind of cluttered menu. So you need to make sure that it's simple. Avoid cluttering your mega menu with too many options or too much content. You also need to really carefully consider how it's going to appear on mobile, because typically mega menus are designed for desktop, and you are obviously not going to be able to show the whole thing in the same way in a mobile view. So likely you're going to need to add layers of navigation and think about how your users are going to know where they are within that navigation structure as they click through the different bits. So a couple of examples here. On the left, you've got this diesel example. And here they've got different levels of the menu, so primary, secondary, tertiary levels of the menu, all have different sorts of interactions. It's really inconsistent, and that would probably be quite confusing for users to interact with. On the other hand, you've got this Best Buy menu. So as they click through each layer of this menu, it's quite consistent in the way that it behaves. It's probably a bit easier for users to understand and to understand where they are as well. Another thing to think about with mega menus is how sensitive they are. So, you can have a user who doesn't want to use a mega nav and they need to be able to scroll over it quickly without it opening. So for example, here on this Wayfair site, if you wanted to scroll from sort of like the main body of the homepage up to that search bar at the top there, you wouldn't want the mega menu to open every time. And thankfully, they've done it really well. They've built in a slight delay on the mega menu so it doesn't do that. So you can just scroll straight up to the search bar without it opening the mega menu. So build in a slight delay and make sure it's not too sensitive. And that kind of goes for the elements within the mega menu as well. Sometimes I've seen them where it sort of jumps you around too quickly as you scroll along it. And you can end up sort of very confused about where you are and trying to select a particular thing, but it keeps jumping you somewhere else. Fitts law is something that's really important to think about as well when you're using and designing mega menus. So this law is about the time to move to a target depends on how big it is and how far away it is. And it's called Fitts law because it was a principle that was designed in 1954 by a psychologist called Paul Fitts. So it was named after him. And it's a really simple principle, but it's really useful to guide the design and the implementation of buttons and links. Because basically what it's saying is the position and the size of your buttons is going to affect the usability of your website or app. And when we think about applying Fitts law to UX, there's different ways that we can think about that, different things we can do really to aid users. So one particular example that's particularly pertinent for mega menus is thinking about how big your targets are and how close they are in proximity. So this isn't a mega menu, but you can see here on this mobile website that there's 4 different links and they're all very close together and they're all very tiny as well. And you can also see that there is a cancel button right next to the confirm button with very small gap, very tiny targets for people to be able to tap on. So what you want to do with your buttons, according to Fitts law, you need to be able to ensure there's sufficient space between the targets and that they're kind of laid out in a way that they've got a target size that is big enough for people to be able to click on or tap on. You don't want to put delete targets very close to action targets because the likelihood is that people are going to click on or tap on the wrong thing by accident. So really make sure you're considering spacing, you're considering size of the different buttons and links. And that's particularly true when it comes to menus on mobile as well. The final thing to touch on for mega menus is thinking about how you code them effectively for screen reader users. So often I've seen examples where they're not done well, they don't work properly, and screen reader users get stuck in this kind of endless loop of having to listen through really long lists of menu items before they can move on to the next primary category. Wayfair did do really well here, so this is using it with VoiceOver, and they offer the option when you're navigating via tab, this little button here that you can see pops up, open furniture menu drop down. So it doesn't automatically take you into the mega menu. It offers you the option to open it first. Because you can imagine, say I wanted to get to, I don't know, textiles and bedding, And we saw this menu opened up earlier on, didn't we? Imagine if it read through all of those different things first for each of those primary navigation buttons before you got to the one that you wanted to get to. That would be quite painful and frustrating, and likely would result in screen reader users abandoning use of that site. So think about mega menus and how to implement them well. They can be a positive thing if they're implemented carefully. The next common pitfall that I want to talk about is low information scent. And you might be thinking, what is information scent? Well, this is a principle that's defined by the Nielsen-Norman group. And it's basically a mix of kind of cues and clues, things that users rely on to assess whether the information that they're looking at on a website or app is relevant to them, is valuable to them. So they can kind of know, am I looking in the right place here? Am I getting closer to the thing that I'm looking for or not? And there's some different things that kind of aid them in that process of working that out. So things like the link label itself, the context in which a link is shown, and also all their prior experiences as well. All of that is going to inform their interpretation and their thoughts about the information sent. Obviously, we want our links and labels to have a strong information sense. We want them to click on the thing that has the highest information sent. We want them to know where they're going and to select the right link so that they don't get lost. So you can see in this example here, the top right version, top right link, join our research community. This is on a university website, clearly communicates what the user can expect. And that's a combination of things, combination of both the link description, it's very clear what you're going to go through to next if you click on that, a combination of the context of it being on a university website, that helps too, and then all of the prior experience and those things, and also the type of user who's going to be on this site, the kind of user base, if you like, that is going to mean that that link will probably be highly understood. Conversely, if you have a low information scent, it can obviously cause confusion. So Nottingham County Council's website here, so this is for school admissions, they've got 4 different links to apply for a school place, and each of them is labelled with basically what sounds like the same thing, the same task, but they've got slight variations in the way that it's written. So let's have a look at those 4. You can make an application for a school place online. You can apply for a secondary school place, apply for a school place, and applying for a school place, September. They all pretty much sound like the same thing, but actually there's only 2 of these that are duplicates. 3 of those, they link to 3 different places. And it's not really clear from the way that they're labelled that they do that. There's nothing that really indicates what the difference between them is, that they're going to jump you to different parts of that process. And additionally, with this site, there's another thing just to mention here as well, is that the primary and secondary actions, all of it is kind of designed in the same way. There's equal sort of weight and position given to the different buttons on this screen. So it's very hard when a user comes on here for them to know where to start. And I do wonder, we've got this little not sure where to start bit in the bottom right. I do wonder why that needed to be added. It's possibly because they've not thought about the hierarchy of the links on there. The third pitfall that I want to talk about in terms of navigation is where your navigation structure is based on your organisation structure. So think back to that scenario that I talked about just at the beginning, where you're shopping in another country, you can't really understand what any of the signs say, and you're feeling a bit lost. So often we see organisations who design their navigational structures and their information architecture on organisational structures that mean absolutely nothing to the user. So they'll name key menu items after business units that users don't understand, or they've never heard the terminology for before. And actually, sometimes those organisations can be really resistant to changing the organisation of those pages of the site or the app according to users' needs, according to users' mental models, because they're very stuck in, well, no, this is how our business is organised. This is our business unit. So everything that is within this team should sit in this section of the app. And we couldn't possibly move it to anywhere else that would make more sense to the users. But if users don't know the language, they don't know how your business is organised, that's not going to help them on their journey. So those are the 3 pitfalls that we're going to talk about today. We're going to move on now and talk about 3 key navigation principles. So the first one is that you need to understand what your users' tasks are. You can't design your navigation, you can't lay out really any page or screen effectively without knowing this. So you need to understand both their needs and their primary goals. What are they actually there to do? Why have they come to the site or the app in the first place? What are they interested in? This example here is for a local trust website. So they describe themselves as being a place-based funder supporting communities to achieve their ambitions. And at the very top of the page, they've got this whole section, when it loads up, which is devoted to a video which shows the different trusts and the different people in them. But actually, when we tested this website with real users, we found that actually the primary task that people were coming here to do was they wanted to find a trust in their area. And all the participants really struggled with this because the thing that they needed to click on to get to that and do that task was right at the bottom of the page. They had to scroll quite a long way to be able to get to this find an area near you and discover that bit. So it's really important to think about what is a user's primary need, primary goal when they come onto your site or your app, because that may not be what you're expecting that it is. And so you need to understand that and then change your navigation, change your structure, even of your pages, of your screens, so that you can meet those needs. And really the best way to find out what those needs are is to conduct testing with representative users. And I'll come on a bit later to talk about how you can do that and why that can be such an effective way to help you understand your users. So once you actually know what your users' key tasks are, you can then start to make sure that your buttons and your links support them in completing those tasks. And one of the ways that you can do that is using really clear task-specific words for button labels. So usually you want your buttons to use verbs that refer to an action that the user is taking. So this button at the top here, tap in, is not particularly clear about what the user is doing there. They may not understand that, particularly if this is the first time they're using this app. They may not know what that means. In comparison to book a room, which is very clear, it's an action, and it very clearly states what you're going to do if you click on that button. So other terms that you would want to avoid in buttons would include things like okay or learn more about what. So you want to include actions that people are taking to help them know the next step that they're taking as they click on a button. Also, once you know users' primary needs and primary goals, you can make sure that those things are highlighted on your page, on your screen. So obviously on this Young's app on the left that we've just been looking at, there's so many buttons that are all competing for attention. They're all designed at the sort of same level of visual hierarchy. And we've got those sort of like dark bluey kind of colour. There's 5 different buttons that are that same colour. And then there's also these sort of image-based buttons as well. So there's no real distinction between primary and secondary actions. So people, when they come into that app, are probably going to feel a little bit overwhelmed with choice and not really know where to start. It makes it quite hard to scan. It makes it quite hard for them to make a decision. If we look at the one on the right, so the Diesel website on mobile, this has got a primary action, but it's got 2 buttons to it, men and women. And they've done that because they know from research that that is where people start from. And they've made them a primary colour. They've made them really bold. It helps them stand out and it helps people decide, oh, right, that's the thing that I should do first. And then everything else is a secondary task kind of for inspiration, if you like. So they've made those secondary buttons white, but they've also included that red colour. And that means that they've not only maintained their brand colours, but they've also kind of linked them visually between the primary action buttons and the secondary action buttons so that it feels consistent. You imagine if those secondary buttons were blue or green or something, instead it would sort of break that visual closeness in people's minds and the relationship between them. So yeah, think about how you're implementing your primary and secondary buttons. Think about the way that you're designing them and moving people towards the actions that they are looking for. The next principle to talk about is that navigation should be visible, which sounds like quite an obvious thing to say, but actually the discoverability of a navigation is proportionate to its visibility. I don't know if you can see it on here where the menu is, but it is here, not very easy to see, particularly at certain sizes. There was a study done back in 2016 by the Nielsen-Norman Group that found that when you're using a hamburger menu like we've got here, the discoverability of navigation is cut almost in half on desktop and by a third on mobile. And we're all quite familiar now, I would imagine, with what a hamburger menu is. It's that sort of 3 little lines that is meant to look like a menu. It was originally designed in the 80s, actually, by Xerox to look like a menu. And there has been so much that has been written about hamburger menus over the years, both for and against using them. But on balance, I think really what the Nielsen-Norman study suggested is that actually hiding a navigation behind a link will make it harder, because users might not necessarily see that link and know to click on it to get to the navigation. However, it's worth noting this study was obviously done 9 years ago, and user behaviour does change over time. And because we experience using interfaces over time, the more we do that, the more we become familiar with a common feature. And obviously today, hamburger menus are generally quite a common function, particularly on mobile devices where there's not enough space for a full navigation. However, I would still say that a hidden menu is better to just use on mobile rather than on larger devices. So here, on this example, there is plenty of room to be able to put the navigation on this homepage. And that means not only will people be able to get to the link that they're wanting quicker, but also that it helps to aid discoverability, because if they're not sure what this product or service is about, they can kind of get a bit of more of a sense of that just from seeing the menu displayed on the website itself, rather than having to click into something. So think about how you can make sure that your navigation is visible. The final principle to talk about is leveraging common patterns and conventions. So Jacob's law states that users spend most of their time on other sites. Now, when we're in our bubbles of our apps or our websites, and we're always thinking about what people are doing on our site, our app, and we kind of forget that actually this is only a small part of their day, only a small part of their week. They're not constantly 24/7 on our website. And so what that means is that because users are spending so much of their time on other sites and other apps, users are going to prefer your site and app to work in the same way as all the ones that they already know, all the things that they're already familiar with. So you need to make sure that yours works the same way if you want them to be able to quickly learn how to use it. And in particular, you want to think about labels, icons, images. You want to think about consistency with interaction patterns and with navigation patterns as well. And we'll talk a bit more about navigation, as that is our topic for today. So when you're implementing navigation menus, you really want to follow existing conventions, because users have already got that mental model of how your navigation should work, because they've used several similar websites before, right? So they're carrying with them all of that prior experience as they come to use your service. So if you deviate from those conventions, it can actually create confusion. And not surprisingly, often confusion and confusing navigation is one of the reasons that people state as a kind of key reason that they've ended up abandoning a site or abandoning using an app, because they've not been able to navigate effectively. It doesn't fit with their mental model of how they've navigated other things previously. So to talk through a few specific examples, just looking at the very top sections of some e-commerce websites, if you have a look here on the top left, you usually would have a logo that navigates you back to home if you click on it. In the top center, you usually, so in 4 out of 5 cases here, we've got a visible search bar. On the top right, you've got things like store finder, help, my account, favorites, basket, those kinds of things in there. And then in the lower middle, you've got your visible top tier navigation. So if you ignore those conventions, that is obviously going to make it harder for your users to navigate through your website, and it creates the risk of them leaving more quickly than you'd like them to. So yes, deviate from conventions at your risk, I suppose, is the point here. So to be able to implement any kind of effective change to your navigation, it needs to be based on evidence. You need to understand your users, like we said at the beginning. You need to understand what their primary aims, their primary goals are, their needs from your site or app, you need to understand their mental model. You need to understand how they sort of group things in their mind and where they're expecting to find things. And to do that, you need to understand that, you need to gather your evidence. You need to gather that knowledge about your users. And to gather that evidence, as you might have guessed from the title of today's webinar, you need to do some research. You need to conduct research with representative users of your website or app. And there is all sorts of different ways that you can conduct research. But today I'm going to talk you through 3 that are particularly relevant when it comes to considering information architecture and navigation. So let's first up talk about usability testing. If you've got an existing website or you've got an existing app, even if you're in the early stages of designing one, conducting usability testing is going to really give you so much valuable, rich insight into what's working well, what's not working so well, and also why. Now, you might already have an idea, perhaps, of where some of the sort of problem areas are. Maybe you've looked at your analytics before and you can kind of see bounce rates and drop-off points. And analytics are really helpful for telling you what's happening, but they don't necessarily always tell you why something is happening. And that's why usability testing is really helpful, because you have the opportunity to dig into the why and to understand more deeply why users are doing a particular thing. You could also run a survey, perhaps, asking people about their opinion of how they found navigating your website or app and get them to score it on a scale. Or you could ask them in a survey to tell you exactly like the steps that they went through to find something on your website. But ultimately, the results of that survey will be their report of what they did or their opinion of how they found it. And people don't always kind of match up what they did with what they told you they did, or that reflects their experience accurately. And that's not because they're trying to lie or they mean to lie, but sometimes they say they found something easy when they didn't, or sometimes they try and explain their process and they forget things, they forget steps that they went through or workarounds that they used. So this quote here, where it says, "To design an easy to use interface, pay attention to what users do, not what they say. Self-reported claims are unreliable, as are user speculations about future behaviour." So this is why we need to observe user behaviour for ourselves, to understand what they do, to understand where they go, to understand, what blockers they come up against, and also how they try and find their way. And this is really why usability testing is so significant as a research tool. Just to kind of pause for a moment so that we can just talk about what usability actually is. I think this definition by the ISO is quite helpful for understanding the different parts of usability. So usability is the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. And that looks like a bit of a dry sort of description, but we can unpack it and understand a little bit more about what it means. So effectiveness, first of all, can they actually do what they're trying to do? It's kind of a key one. Efficiency, how quickly can they do it? So maybe they can do the task, but it's very complex. It's not very efficient for them to be able to achieve what they're trying to do. And then satisfaction, how do they actually feel? How comfortable are they about using that? How do they feel about the experience? How is their attitude towards it once they've been through that? And of course, you can measure all of these different things within usability testing as well. So just a couple more things, examples really, to help make the point about how we would do this. It talks in this definition about specified users. So in this example here, does it really matter if Joe Public can't use an air traffic control system? Well, no, because you or I are probably not going to go into an air traffic control tower anytime soon and try and do that. So we need to, when we're doing usability testing, make sure that we're testing with specified users, with people who are actually representative users of the particular product or system or service, whatever it is that we're testing. It needs to be relevant people that we're speaking to. And that's why it's really important to make sure that you're recruiting good participants and have a robust recruitment process. We have our own internal team who are able to help us in recruiting the right people for research, both for our client projects and also directly for other clients as well. And so we are in a very privileged position that we are able to guarantee that we're speaking to the right people, because really research is only going to be as good as the participants that you've got involved in it. So making sure they're the right people to speak to is very important. So the specified goals bit, if goals aren't important for your user and they're not important for your business, then there's really no point in designing for it. So you need to think about the particular goals for your business and your user and how they kind of marry in the middle. And also the context of use. So it's no good to just think about, I think this is an example of like a delivery driver and their little PDA that they use to be able to sort of put in their deliveries and get people to sign. It's not really any good if they can use that in a sort of formal lab setting and they're fine there. But actually, when they get out into the streets and they're using it on their rounds, the sunlight bounces off the device, or the rain just means that it's unusable. So you really need to think about the context of use, because different devices, different modes and different kind of contexts are going to influence the experience, and you need to understand that context of use in order to be able to design for it. There's kind of two real reasons for conducting usability testing. First is formative testing. So that's where you're testing something during its development to identify problems, find solutions. And the best way to implement that is to test in an iterative pattern. So you identify a problem, you fix that problem, and then you go on and you test again in sort of an iterative cycle. The other way is summative testing. So this is where you've created the thing and you're evaluating the final thing. It's a bit more sort of checkbox based sometimes. Sometimes it compares similar or identical products and services, and it evaluates how far is this product or service actually meeting its objectives kind of at the end of that process. And ideally, you would kind of be doing your formative testing and your iterative testing throughout, and then summative testing at the end. But there's different options there. So again, other ways that you can think about different options when it comes to usability testing. One-to-one usability testing is by far the sharpest tool in the box for getting to the bottom of usability and customer experience issues. So this is where you have a one-to-one session where you've got a participant and a moderator. That could take place in different settings. It could be in a sort of formal lab-based setting. It could be in a cafe where you're just sort of grabbing somebody, or we've done it before on a university sites and cultural sites and other places like that, where you're just sort of pulling in people into the research and just getting them involved like that. And it can also be sort of contextual testing where you've pre-recruited people to come along to the particular setting where you're wanting to test. So like here, we've got some testing that was, I think, for Costa, where we're looking at different screens and things. So there's different ways that you can do that one-to-one testing in a moderated way. And as I said, this is really important because you're actually then able to observe what they're doing, not just hear their description of what they're doing. And you've got the opportunity to ask them open, non-leading questions to sort of understand actions, understand why they're hesitating and all those kinds of things as well. You can also, of course, conduct remote research. So you can do that both moderated and unmoderated. When it's moderated, obviously you've got a moderator who is speaking directly to the participants, and moderated studies usually provide a lot more context, a lot more insights than unmoderated studies. Unmoderated studies where there's no direct conversation between the researcher and the participants, and instead it's all kind of conducted through an online tool. And sometimes they're even sort of automated. So there's, it's happening sort of in an automated fashion rather than there being really minimal contact between the research team and the participants. So that kind of testing is particularly helpful for addressing questions like what percentage of participants can successfully log in, how long does it take for people to find a product. Those kinds of things tend to be better suited for remote unmoderated testing. So the second research method that I want to talk to you about is card sorting. Card sorting is a research method where you try and understand the way that users would naturally organise or naturally think about the different types of information or content that you've got. So basically, you would write your different content ideas or your content sections on cards, And then you get users to sort them out in a way that makes sense to them. And then you can get them to label those groups. And then during the analysis, you look for the different patterns that are coming up and use those different groupings to help inform the information architecture and the whole structure of your site or your app. So it's particularly useful when you're creating a new IA or a new navigation structure for anything. It can be a website, it could be a cash machine, it could be a TV set-top box UI, it could be a ticket machine, in-car entertainment system, so many different things that card sorting can be useful for. And it helps you when you're looking to even create like a smaller area. So if you're designing a particular area of a website, for example, if you're wanting to check that the taxonomy that you've got, an existing taxonomy is still relevant, it can help with that too. And it helps you to identify trends. So do users want to see the information grouped by subject, by process, by information type? What should the different groups be called? Is there any terminology that's confusing? And are there any similarities or differences between the different user groups? So there's some different types of card sorts. The first is the open card sort. So this is where you give a participant cards. They then sort those cards into some different categories. And then what they do is they choose what the labels should be for the categories that they've created. So for example, in this one, you've got somebody who's grouped all the skincare and makeup products together and then called the category cosmetics. But somebody else might put skincare things in a category called beauty. So it's all about looking for where the patterns are in the groupings that people create. Open card sorts are particularly useful when you want to know how users will group content and you want to know what they would label those groups. And it's the best method to use really if you're designing an IA or sort of content groupings from the very beginning, from scratch. The other type of card sort that you can use is where participants sort cards into predefined categories. So this can be a helpful way of kind of evaluating the effectiveness of a proposed IA, although I would say a tree test is probably a more effective way of testing an IA in that sense. But yes, you can see here they've got a stack of cards, they've got those predefined categories and they're grouping them under there. So really you want to do a closed card sort when you've done an open card sort already, so sort of to validate what you've done in that open card sort. Get myself confused, but you want to validate the categories of content and the headings that you're proposing after you've done that open. So after they've had the opportunity to define their own categories, you can then say, right, we've taken all of the findings from that, we've now defined these are the proposed categories, we're going to get everybody to now sort into these proposed categories and see if that works. The final type is a hybrid card sort. So this is where you have a bit of both. You can give participants the opportunities to sort cards into categories that you give them, but they can also create their own categories as well. So if they feel like, oh, I've got some cards that don't quite fit into one of the categories that you've given me, that's not a problem because they can just create their own category and add some things in there. So you might do that if you've got an IA that's kind of partially complete, but you want to see maybe how other people would label the rest of the structure, how they would sort the rest of the structure. So that might be an example where you would use a hybrid sort. Of course, there are, again, different ways that you can do it. So you can do moderated card sorting with physical cards. And you can also do moderated or unmoderated card sorting using online tools as well. So participants would be sent a link and would be sent instructions to doing that online, or of course if it's part of a moderated session, sometimes we'll even do a moderated card sort within a usability testing session. So it's kind of a bit of a mixture of things that we're covering in that session. It might be that we're testing some areas of an app, and then we're asking people to conduct a moderated card sort digitally with us, so that they can then talk us through. Is obviously with a moderated card sort, whether you do it in person with physical cards or online, you've got all the benefit of being able to get them to unpack why they've put things in certain groups and why they've given things certain labels, which you wouldn't get with an unmoderated online card sort. So then you get all of the different results of the card sort. And if you use an online platform, you would typically see something like this. So this is a dendrogram, which shows all of the different common groups that people have created and how many people agree with those groups. So you can see here, this bit in green, we can see that 23% of participants agreed that these 9 cards in this group belong together. And there's different things that they thought you could name that: booking a flight, find a holiday. But 23% is quite a low correlation, really. So if we kind of take a step back and we go back a branch, you can see here 62% it jumps to, and the names are quite similar, but instead we've lost 4 cards from the group here. So we've lost ski and snowboard, we've lost tours and activities, where we fly, and inspire me. So by losing those cards, there's stronger correlation between the remaining cards and more people agreeing on what that name should be. And if we look at just those 4 cards, we can see there's only a 46% correlation, but they're more related to sort of inspiration, with suggestions like destinations, inspire me, those kinds of things. So if we go back to the original branch and we go back one step further, we can get it to 77% correlation by losing, I think it's the category group booking. When that comes off, it then means there's a much stronger correlation between those. And so, you might decide at that stage, I'm going to keep group booking in the same category, but I might consider, is the name right for the category, or do actually I need another way of finding that? So building an architecture is not necessarily always black and white. It means that you need to interpret these results and make some decisions. There's different nuances to it. And obviously it's the researcher's job to interpret all of that data, as well as all the insights from their conversations, if it's been done in a moderated setting, to decide what they should include within each category. Another tool that you can use for analysing card sort results is called a similarity matrix. So this clusters together related pairs together, and it shows how many people grouped each topic sort of together. So we can see here 92% of participants thought that last minute flight deals and cheap flights should be grouped together. So the 2 things that are next to each other, not sure if you can see my cursor, they're grouped together. And it got to sort of 92% of participants who thought that. So they sort of make it easier to analyse by shading the squares, and the darker the square is, the closer the correlation it is. And so what it does, it essentially reveals groupings in the same way as the dendrogram does, but it also shows the topics that have the least correlation to each other. So you kind of can use both of these tools to analyse your card sorts and work out how you should structure your IA. Another thing to think about is often about how deep your structure should be. So you've got 2 different sort of versions here: a more sort of flat structure and broad structure, and a narrower but much deeper structure. And knowing whether you use a flat or a deep structure is really going to depend on your content. It's going to depend on users' mental models, but generally speaking, information is easier to discover in a flatter structure because it's not buried through multiple layers. And flatter hierarchies are also more likely to have categories that are specific and don't overlap because there are more at each level. However, sometimes a flatter structure might have a bit more of sort of conceptual labels because there's more options in each one. So you really need to be careful not to make your structure too flat. You've got 2 links and it's just this or this, because that obviously is not going to signpost effectively enough everything that sits underneath it. So once you have done all your card sorting and you've come up with your suggested information architecture or the changes that you want to make, you can conduct tree testing. So this is where you essentially want to evaluate the proposed site structure, or the supposed menu, or the supposed structure of your kiosk UI, or whatever it is that you're creating. Sometimes it's known as reverse card sorting, and you do it on a really simplified text version of a structure. So it's got no sort of visual design influence, no navigation aids. It's just purely text-based and a really simplified version. So to set that up, there are different online tools that you can use to conduct a tree test. And then you essentially input your tree, you set up some tasks to find out what people can achieve. So if they came onto your website to do a particular thing, can they do that? And you just really need to enter the common tasks for your site in those. And then you obviously want to recruit your participants. So you'll get a unique study link that you can send out to your customers, to your users. And obviously you want to make sure that those, as I said before, are representative users. The main goal of a tree test, as I've said, is to validate the arrangement of the information on your website or app. It's not about testing the kind of the text description of your website, if you like. So it's not going to include everything. It's not going to look exactly the same as a sitemap. It's a very specific format for a tree test. You want to make sure that users have got a logical endpoint to select at the end of a tree. You want to avoid using any sort of internal terminology, and ideally avoid referencing any kind of UI functionality as well. And really, when coming into a tree test, users don't have a lot of information. So the key is to make sure that your tasks are really effective and informative enough so that they can complete the intended journeys. You want to phrase your tasks as scenarios. You can see a couple of examples on the screen here. You want to make sure that you're giving users enough context, and importantly, you want to avoid using keywords that match your IA, because it's going to give the game away of where they need to click. So they need to have enough context to understand what they're doing, but don't give away the answer to your particular task. And then from there, you can analyze your tree test and you can work out what is it that actually fits together in much the same way we've got here. You can see the little tree diagram. It begins to show you what things are related to each other. And that enables you to see the routes that people have taken through that tree and where they've got to and where they've been successful and where they've not. You can also add follow-up questions as well about whether they found what they wanted to, or whether how they felt about the process and whether they felt they were successful or not. So tree testing can be a really helpful way of validating your structure of whatever it is that you might be designing. So in summary today, I have talked you through 3 common navigation pitfalls: badly implemented mega menus, low information sense, and navigation structure being based on an organization structure. I've talked you through 3 key navigation principles to implement: understand what your users' tasks are, that your navigation should be visible, and that you should leverage common patterns and conventions in your navigation. And finally, we talked about 3 research tools: usability testing, card sorting, and tree testing, that can be particularly helpful when you are thinking about navigation and IA. If you're interested in knowing more about any of this, we have a whole UX training program where you can find out more. Some of the ones that I particularly recommend in relation to this would be customer journey mapping, modeling, and IA, for example, where we cover some of this in much more detail. We also, if you're interested, are lead trainers for 3 internationally recognised UX qualifications that are independently assessed by UXQB as well. So there's lots of different opportunities for further training. I just wanted to mention before we get into the Q&A in the last few minutes is that we are offering a limited number of free 1-hour consultancy sessions. So if you have got an idea of something that you would like to address, or maybe you're already working on a project looking at some of this stuff that we've been talking about today, maybe you're already about to conduct some usability testing, or you're thinking about restructuring an area of your app, then please get in touch. You can see the link in the chat, and there's an opportunity there to go in, give us some details about what you're wanting to talk to us about, and we will offer you a free 1-hour consultancy session to speak to us about that, and we'll do our best to help you. Please give us as much information as you can. That will just mean that when we come into those conversations with you, we're best equipped to help. As I say, there is a limited number, so go quickly if you want to snap one of those up. But yes, I think we've got a few minutes left just for some Q&A. I'm just going to bob back over to my other screen so that I can see the questions that I'm sure have been rolling in as I've been talking.
They have. So the one at the top of our list is, what do you think is the best tool for running online card sorts? We thought we might get this one, didn't we?
Yes, I did. So Optimal Sort tends to be the tool that we prefer. They have card sorting on there and also tree testing.
Other tools are available that might
absolutely
suit you more. So yeah, have a bit of a route about the internet, and you might find something that suits you more. But that one is the one we've been using for a long time, and it suits us. Oh, they're moving around. That doesn't help me.
Oh.
I was coming in, I thought there was going to be a different one. So there was a question from Alison, great name, saying, is there a better option than a hamburger menu on mobile? I've been thinking about that and also looking at different apps on my phone to see what's there. So I think the answer is that I would give, and Aimée may have a different idea, is it depends on how many menu items you need to put in your menu. If you've only got a couple, then a bottom bar is probably better. If you've got a lot, then either a hamburger menu or a more option that introduces the same functionality. And I was having a look around Marks and Spencer's app. While you might not be able to buy anything on it still at the moment, it does have a really nice menu on the bottom and a more ... that allows things, allows an increased number of items to come up on the side, and works really neatly. So that's one to have a look at. I think the hamburger menu is recognized now. So it was, to start with, people didn't know what it was, but starting to see it come into sort of desktop websites as well now. I don't know if you had any other thoughts.
I think the key is labeling it effectively, so making sure that people are aware of where it is. And also on mobile, you want to think about sort of the reach that people have. So think about how they're actually going to be holding that device and where their thumb is going to be able to reach to as well. So making sure that where you're placing those menus, whether it is, you know, sort of along a bottom bar or a singular hamburger menu icon, think about where that is to make it as easy as possible as well. Lots of different considerations when it comes to mobile.
Yeah, and you can always, rather than use a hamburger icon, just say menu, because that's really clear to people. So Jenny asked, how do you find a balance between what your users' needs or goals are and what your organization wants to put front and center? Should it be a balance, or should you be guided 100% by users?
I think, yes, it absolutely should be a balance. I don't think you can 100% be guided by users or 100% guided by the business. It needs to be both and meeting the needs of both. And we've been in numerous situations over the years with clients where there's been sort of different internal stakeholders that have wanted their thing to be the thing that is front and center, or their thing is the first thing in the navigation or the first thing on the homepage. That's why you get things like carousels on homepages, because everybody wants their thing to be displayed, so it just scrolls through multiple things. I think you need to understand why somebody wants something to be there. And like I said before, about gathering evidence from your users about why they want a certain thing or why they're struggling to find something. All of that evidence can help you to push back internally when you're getting the sort of the opinions that are coming from internal people. But yeah, really, I think you can't just design a website purely for the business or purely for the users. It needs to be understanding the needs of both, because otherwise, ultimately, it won't be a sustainable thing. You know, if users are not interested in buying anything, but the business needs to sell them some things to continue existing, then there needs to be a way that they can do that on there. Don't know if you'd add anything, Ali.
No, that I think that covers it. Ben asked, would you recommend doing unmoderated or moderated testing for tree testing? And I think this is another one of the it depends answers. I would say, I found as well that people tend to be a fan of one or the other as well. So it can be a little bit of personal preference. I'm quite a fan of unmoderated because I like to get the numbers in. The more responses you can get to a tree test, then it's easier to see those patterns emerging, and it tends to be a little bit more robust. But moderated tree testing can be really useful if you want to understand people's reasons for why they've put things, because you may get a response that's completely unexpected and you've got no idea why it happened, and an unmoderated tree test won't give you those answers, whereas a moderated one allows you to really dig into people's understanding, and you get a better grip on what their mental model is, I would say.
Yeah, I think it also depends what you've done previously. So what other research have you done? Is this just the final sort of stage in a process where you have done all of the card sorting stuff beforehand, or or not, because that will feed into whether you'd want a bit more qualitative insight.
Okay. Jay asks a question about gain. So with the AI in the middle, is that intentional? Is it a big push towards AI? I would say there are lots of reasons behind the name. That isn't the primary one. If you go onto the thisisgain.com website, there's a video right at the top that gives you a bit of an insight as to why the name Gain was settled on. There's a lot of things about gaining control and gaining an advantage and gaining insight. There's lots of great reasons that name was chosen. Having said that, emerging and developing technology is absolutely a key focus of Gain, and we've got a team of people focusing on that. So it might be a happy coincidence that there's a nice AI in the middle of it. Would be my answer. I don't know if that's the official answer, but it's the one I'll go with. I don't know if we got time for more. I'm not sure. I've sort of lost track.
We're slightly over, so we might have to end there, I think. But thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the session. Hope you found it useful. And yeah, do go and have a look at that link to let us know if you'd like to sign up for one of those free consultation sessions. Or if you're interested in speaking to us about anything else, just reach out. Joe will be in touch with that link as well and the recording after the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.